Hey Summers, welcome back to our channel. My name is Nathan Ng, and like always, I'm going to give you guys a rundown of some new Korean builds that have surfaced as a result of the new patch. We're covering every single role, so stay tuned if you want to learn the newest in innovation. But before we start, I want you guys to know that we've begun a giveaway. We're giving away ride points, coaching, ProGuide points, ProGuide subscriptions, and so much more. All you have to do for a chance to win is subscribe, join our Discord using the link in the description down below, and then go ahead and check out the giveaway tab. That being said, let's jump right into this video. Like always, we'll start by talking about the top lane. We'll feature Gragas as one of our first picks. After receiving some preseason buffs, Gragas made his comeback in the jungle. While he still isn't a crazy OP pick, Gragas is not only an acceptable jungler, but also an exceptional top laner. Top lane Gragas is back, and players should be terrified because it's AP Gragas. For those of you who suffer from nightmares of getting one-shot by the big fat drunkard, well, I am very sorry. Let me talk about the runes though and items for a little bit. First off, your keystone choices are either Comet or Phase Rush. Comet will be great for some additional poke damage against easy lane matchups where you're going to be bullying your opponents. On the other hand, Phase Rush is great for its utility and offers a hit and run trading pattern if you need the extra safety. For runes, take one of those two keystones, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, Scorch, Magical Footwear, Biscuit Delivery, Double Adaptive Force, and flex your defensive runes based on the matchup. The items are Night Harvester if you're going Phase Rush or Rocket Bill if you want Comet. From there, build Sorcerer's Shoes, Zanya's Hourglass, Rabadon's Death Cap, Void Staff, and a flexible final item like Morello Namicon. Alternatively, if you picked up a big lead early, you should build a Magi Soul Sealer into Death Cap to keep the snowball going and terrorize the Summoner's Rift. Night Harvester is great with Phase Rush because of the seemingly limitless amount of movement speed you'll have access to in a teamfight. It shouldn't be legal to be that big and fast at the same time, and AP Gragas is gonna hurt no matter what runes you take. Rocket Belt provides a single burst of movement speed along some extra burst damage, while also providing spell penetration as you finish more items. In other words, it's a full burst build that commits to one-shotting enemies. Before moving forward, let me take a second and mention our question of the day. Aside from your teams, what's keeping you from winning your games right now? For me, it's the fact that grievous wounds exist. A lot of champions I like to play rely on heavy healing, and anytime someone builds healing reduction, I'm sad, disappointed, and crushed on an emotional level. Let me know your answers in the comments below. Now, let's get back to those builds. Next in the top lane is Rengar. Bruiser Rengar has been a thing for a while now, but we didn't see much of him in the preseason. However, with this setup, Rengar has been slowly making his return to the top lane as a drain tank. For runes, run Conqueror, Overheal, Legend Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Sudden Impact, Ravenous Hunter, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and whatever defensive runes that you need for your matchup. Now for items, start with the Doran Shield for the immense sustain it provides. As the game progresses, you're going to be building Gore Drinker, either Plated Steel Caps or Mercury Treads, Ravenous Hydra, Death's Dance, Seric's Gauge, and Spirit Visage. Not only does this build provide plenty of damage, you're also going to be accessing an incredible amount of healing. The combination of Gore Drinker, Ravenous Hydra, and Spirit Visage provides you with ridiculous amount of lifesteal, not to mention Rengar's W, which also provides a generous amount of healing. Seric's Gauge will give you the extra shielding that you'll need to survive burst damage while also playing a part in the overall theme of this build. Rengar's built-in damage is already very high, and the fact that this build allows you to build both damage and healing takes full advantage of this. Although the burst damage is a little bit lower than a typical Assassin Rengar build, you'll instead be a much more potent duelist with this build, and it's also a little bit more forgiving when you don't manage to take out your target in one go. That's going to be wrapping up the top lane build, so go ahead and take another look on the screen for the recap. Alright, let's head over to the jungle next. One pick that players need to pay more attention to is Kindred. As a ranged champion, there's no doubt that she can prove to be a tricky opponent to deal with. Kindred is one of the few champions that can stand up to Graves at the moment, and that already says a lot. For runes, take Hail of Blades, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Biscuit Delivery, Approach Velocity, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. Approach Velocity is an excellent rune on Kindred because of its synergy with her E, and Blue Smite if you chose to start off the game with Hail Blade. While the choice between Blue and Red Smite is ultimately your own decision, our analysts suggest Blue Smite for this build. For items, you'll want to build Essence Reaver, the Collector, Berserker Greaves, Infinity Edge, Gale Force, and the final flex item as Rapid Fire Cannon, Guardian Angel, or even Storm Razor. The order of items here is really important. While most of the time you'll want to rush mythic items this season, some champions don't really rely on them for their main source of damage. In Kindred's case, you actually want Essence Reaver first because of her short cooldowns. Now that Essence Reaver is a crit damage item that utilizes Spellblade, it actually serves as an incredible first purchase for Kindred, and from there, you can build either the Collector or Gale Force second based on what you think you'll need. The reason that you want Gale Force is because of the immense mobility that you'll be gaining. Kindred is already hard enough to catch, and Gale Force makes the task even more challenging for Kindred's opponents. With all the nerfs to assassin items that have occurred over the past patches, it's time for the new Khazix build. Like Rengar in the top lane, building Khazix as a bruiser isn't a bad choice by any means. Khazix also has great scaling with his Q, and combining raw damage alongside Conqueror, you'll still be able to dish out a ton of damage without having to jump in as a glass cannon. For runes, run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, Sudden Impact, Ravenous Hunter, Double Adaptive Force, and a Flex Defensive rune. For the build, we suggest going the Ember Knife for Red Smite, following the Gore Drinker, Defensive Boots, Steric's Gauge, Black Cleaver, Death Stance, and a flex item like Guardian's Angel. Khaz Q has a 130% bonus AD ratio on it, and we all know the cooldown is extremely short. Against isolated targets, the ratio is even higher. It's absolutely disgusting. 273%, ladies and gentlemen. This build provides you a ton of AD, so when you find yourself in longer fights, just know that your opponents will regret when they realize that you're not using the common builds that we're used to seeing. Finally, we got one more jungle build with Elise. This build is an on-hit build, and also, while it might sound strange, Season 11 has paved the way for some more innovation. Also, Riot decided to buff Elise's Spider Form Q to apply on-hit effects in patch 10.23. While this change alone hasn't single-handedly made on-hit Elise viable, it's a contributing factor alongside the new items this season. The runes that you're going to be running are Press the Attack, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Gragas, Cheap Shot, and Ravenous Hunter. Next for the build, you want to build the core 3 items, Night Harvester, Sorcerer's Shoes, and Nashor's Tooth. From there, you can honestly flex any 3 items based on what you need. An example of this is Deathcap, Zanya's Hourglass, and Morello Nomicon. What makes this build so good is the fact that Elise has a built-in attack speed steroid on her spider form. You'd be surprised how effective Skirmisher Elise is with this build, and more importantly, this build is a great answer to tankier threats. Press the Attack's exposed weakness alongside the immense amount of sustained damage this build provides makes it a great way to adapt and fight enemies that you don't expect to one-shot. Another reason this build might catch enemies by surprise is that most players don't really account for Elise's spider form's healing. There is an AP ratio on the on-hit healing, so when paired with the bonus attack speed, you'll be a lot stronger than expected in extended 1v1s. That covers the jungle builds, so like always, we put those builds up for you guys one more time to check out. Next up is the mid lane. For the mid lane, we'll start by talking about a new build for Yone. With the immense changes to crit items, Immortal Shield Build became the go-to item for Yasuo and Yone mains in this preseason. This item, focused more on survivability, was a great choice for the 2 swordsmen who have to get into the melee range of their opponents and can provide just a little extra bulk for them to work with. However, with the buffs to Gale Force in the recent patches, it's proven itself an excellent item choice for Yone as well. The increased mobility opens up much more aggressive play, while you'll end up a true glass cannon, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Typically, melee champions are countered by immobilizing them or kiting them. Gale Force helps Yone players challenge this counterplay. For runes, you'll want to run either Conqueror against melee champions followed by Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter. If you're against ranged champions, run Fleet Footwork and trade out your secondary runes for Revitalize and Second Wind. In all cases, run Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a Flex Defensive rune. Now for items, you'll start Doran's Blade against melee champions or Doran's Shield against ranged ones. Next, you build Berserker Greaves, Gale Force, Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, or Phantom Dancer, and then tech in situational items like Guardian Angel and Death Stance. For the most part, this build is very similar to what we see Yone players doing already, but it's definitely worth noting that you can use Gale Force in place of Shield Bow. This is both a playstyle preference as well as a potential matchup tech. Experiment with this and see what champions or team comps you think it's more effective against. Our next pick in the mid lane is Graves. You can't keep him in the jungle forever, now can you? Mid lane Graves has been a niche pick for a while now, but Season 11 with its new items means that the builds has obviously changed. What makes Graves a strong mid laner is his wave clear, relative tankiness, and high damage output. A lot of mid laners can't pick a fight with Graves because, he's built different. He's a powerful duelist who will win fights with his high damage output as well as defensive steroids. Many mid lane champions have low base armor as well, so early all-ins can oftentimes lead to disgusting trades or even solo kills. For the runes, you can run Fleet Footwork, Overheal, Legend Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Revitalize, and either Bone Plating against melee champions or a Second Wind against ranged ones. For stats, run Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and whatever defensive rune you'll need. For items, you'll start Doran's Blade in most matchups. Combined with Fleet Footwork and Overheal, you'll be able to access the overshielding effect to keep yourself topped off and ready to fight your enemies. In the late game, this can prove to be invaluable. Next, you'll build Immortal Shield Bow, Defensive Boots, Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer, and a final item like Guardian Angel or Shirelda's Grudge. Aside from being an aggressive pick with tons of damage, Graves has an excellent wave clear. His Q is a linear ability that can quickly burn through minion waves and thus allows for players to help out their junglers, rotate faster, or even roam to the side lane for kills. That said, we've covered our mid lane builds and we'll put them up one more time for you all to see, so make sure you take a good look at them. Alright, now let's move on to the bottom lane. Our first bot lane is gonna be a build for Misfortune. Well, it's technically two builds, but one of them is basically one that's already established. The typical lethality build is one that we've come to know this preseason. You start tier, quickly rush a Manamune, then go into Eclipse, Berserker Greaves, Collector, Infinity Edge, and build situational items. You'll also run Comet, Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Scorch, Cheap Shot, Ravenous Hunter, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor with it. You've seen it and we still think it's pretty good. In fact, it's optimal in many games, and we don't think that you should scrap this build together. Instead, we're here to present you a new build that is great for assassins and divers. For this alternative build, you'll run Grasp of the Undying, Shield Bash, Conditioning, Overgrowth, Overheal, Bloodline, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor as your runes. For items, you'll start off with Doran's Blade and then build Immortal Shield Bow, Berserker Greaves, Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Sorella's Grudge, and a flex item like Spare Visage against heavy AP teams or Guardian Angel for some general safety. While Spare Visage is a rather strange item, you got plenty of healing to work with in this build, and the synergy is quite powerful as long as the MR proves to be useful as well. The reason this build works is that you're able to slowly build a little bit of extra health over the course of the game. Combined with Shield Bow and an immense amount of lifesteal, you'll end up to be way harder to kill. Shield Bash is a rune that you take in this build, not because it's broken, but simply because it provides a little bit of free damage. Every point counts, and the fact that you can potentially deal 20 to 100 more damage in a fight for taking a single rune is very valuable. Shield Bash is also a very powerful tool in lane, where you'll be trading with enemies and constantly building up your overshield back up. If your lane partner can provide you with a shield, then that's even better. They'll be covering our bot lane build this time around, so take a look at the screen for a recap as we talk about the supports to wrap things up. First up for supports, we have Galio Support. He guest stars as a support every once in a while, and this patch seems to be one of those times. With Wretch's glory gone, Galio Support now relies on Turbo Chem Tank as his core item. It works just the same, but it's honestly better because it provides Galio some extra damage. While the price point can be rather high for support, it's a very powerful spike once you do complete the item, and you honestly don't need much more else than this to have an impact on the games. Galio Support provides plenty of crowd control, excellent peel, and also serves as a gimmick pick that can potentially bait enemy mid laners into bad matchups during champion select. For runes, run Aftershock, Shield Bash, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, Double Adaptive Force, and Armor. While the runes are quite straightforward, double check and make sure you have Nimbus Cloak. The extra movement speed is very important, especially during the laning phase where you can decide whether or not you can pick up some early kills and begin snowballing. For items, start off with Relic Shield, then build Chem Tank, Defensive Boots, Dead Man's Plate, Knight's Vow, and you can conclude the build with either Redemption or Gargoyle Stone Plate. However, as a support, you usually don't have money to finish with 6 items. Dead Man's Plate is a very powerful purchase on Galio as the added movement speed makes him so much more threatening. With enough movement speed, you can constantly run down your foes and charge up your taunt to lock them down. The only requirement is that you're faster than your opponent, and sometimes your Turbo Chem Tank will unfortunately be on cooldown. That's where Dead Man's Plate comes into play, as it'll ensure that you're always faster than your opponent. Next up for supports is Poppy Support. Though I don't really condone this will definitely get your opponents hammered. Rather underrated, Poppy Support is beginning to see a lot more play because of how she can protect her teammates. Poppy's W is one of the best abilities in the game, and especially against champions that love to jump in and out of the fights, picking Poppy can put an end to their shenanigans. For runes, you'll run Aftershock, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Cheap Shot, Relentless Hunter, Double Adaptive Force, and Armor. For items, build Steel Shoulder Guards, Defensive Boots, Turbo Chem Tank if you need the engage, or Locket of Iron Solari if you need the peel, Dead Man's Plate, Knight's Vow, and Redemption. While Poppy isn't the type of champion that you want to pick every single game, she's absolutely broken against teams that rely on dashes or abilities that cause them to jump. Things like Alistar's Headbutt or Leona's E can be stuffed out by Poppy's W, and when picked in the correct situations, Poppy is actually a very powerful support. You don't need items to have agency with Poppy, just a good understanding of when to use your abilities, notably your W. The final build that we got for you guys is Predator Thresh. While Thresh has run several laps around Summoner's Rift, roaming to every lane and picking up takedowns everywhere and collecting souls, this Thresh build has gotten a little bit stronger this season as a result of the changes to Dead Man's Plate. Since there's built-in movement speed now, it's actually much more forgiving when you actually end up using your passive for some extra damage. Alternatively, you can instead build a Locket of Iron Solari to provide your team with some extra defense. Just because you run Predator doesn't mean you have to go all in for speed. Well, unless it's your League of Legends purpose to always be the fastest one out there in Summoner's Rift. In this case, I'm glad speed bodes well with you. Predator and Mobility Boots suffice by themselves to provide you with plenty of roaming power. With this build, you're probably going to be ditching your bot laner and then roaming mid and top constantly, but as long as you win the game, it's worth it. Just make sure that your buddy doesn't fall too far behind. For runes, run Predator, Cheap Shot, Zombie Ward, Relentless Hunter, Nimbus Cloak, Water Walking, Double Adaptive Force, and Armor. For items, you're going to want to build Steel Shoulder Guards, Boots of Mobility, Dead Man's Plate, or Locket of the Iron Solari, whichever ones you didn't build, then finish up the build with either Knight's Vow and Redemption. That'll be wrapping up the support build, so go ahead and take one last look on the screen for a recap. Thank you all so much for watching. That's going to be wrapping up our Korean builds for 11.1. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below, and I really hope that you guys give this a try. See if they work for you, and maybe you'll find something new to spam in Ranked. Speaking of Ranked, I'm rooting for you all, and hope you win your games as we begin Season 11. I'll catch you all in the next video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.